Okay, welcome everybody. Are you ready for a masterclass on how to prepare for your best interview? Marenka has won local and national and international awards for performance excellence during her 20 plus years in the executive search industry. In the words of her client, she specialized in recruiting top performers. In the next 15 minutes, you will learn the process she has used to coach hundreds of top performers to become the employer's #1 candidate. In the words of Wes Smedley, the founder of Toastmasters, we will be learning by doing. We will have 2 breakout sessions during which you will have the opportunity to test out some of the ideas you'll be hearing this morning. Also, we ask that you write your questions and comments in the chat in anticipation of the Q&A session, during which Marenka can expand upon the points of interest to you. And of course, your participation is required by means of your feedback on the workshop. So before you leave this workshop, we ask that you kindly go to the chat and select the link for the survey that will be provided at that point. This session will be recorded. For the best possible experience, please put yourself on mute. Later, Adam, our Sue Master, will be taking pictures of the attendees. And then at that time, we'll be asking you to turn on your camera if you wish to be in the picture. We would encourage you to do so. So Marenka has customized this workshop for you, members of Toastmaster. You will learn how you can apply the principle of persuasion, which as a Toastmaster, you already know, to a proven process. This process can be applied in preparing for an interview, whether it is for an opportunity with a new company or a promotion for an existing company, or for any other occasions that require you to promote yourself professionally. I have known Marenka for about 10 years and have her speak many times and have always gained some new insight from her talks. So may I suggest that for the next 15 minutes that you imagine that Marenka is working one-on-one with just you, asking you questions that are key to the discovery of your best professional story. So this session will be recorded, as I mentioned. So please do keep yourself on mute. So now, Marenka, take it away. You have the floor.
Thanks very much, Angela. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, beautiful sunny Sunday morning. And welcome to Your Best Interview, how storytelling can make you the #1 candidate. I'm going to start with a little story. A dear friend of mine asked me to speak with her daughter, Mary, about an upcoming interview. My friend said she's absolutely a bundle of nerves and she's sick with worry. She doesn't even know how to prepare. It's going to be a Zoom interview with 3 managers. She's never met them before. And it's her absolute dream job. It's an internship with one of the largest, most successful companies in the world. And once she was accepted, would be accepted as an intern, she would move from place to place over a period of 2 years. And it was an absolute target, successful road to a career with the firm. Well, I hadn't recruited for the company, so that I didn't really have an inside story that I could kind of communicate, or an inside track to give her. But I said I would speak with Mary and would do the best I could. I spent about an hour with Mary, and she truly started out scared and confused. We had only an hour, and what emerged was an informative story that she used armed for the interview. An informative story that literally transformed her from scared and confused to confident, having clarity. So I'm going to go through that same process that I worked through with Mary with you during this workshop. Now, as Angela mentioned, there are 3 principles of persuasion. And of course, we know that the purpose of the informative interview is not only just to help you prepare for the interview and help you feel more confident going into the interview and help you fly those butterflies in formation, as many of you Toastmasters have heard before. But the purpose of the informative interview is literally to persuade the employer that you are the #1 candidate for the position. So how do we do that? Oh, my goodness. Screen share, just a second, please. Okay, screen sharing. Oh my goodness, just a second here. Okay, the learning outcomes of the workshop. A proven approach to preparing for the interview, how to go about determining your professional strengths, how to zero in on what I call the employer's 3 key criteria, and then how to customize your informative story for a specific opportunity. Here's the outline of the workshop, and we'll just take a few moments and review the principles of persuasion. And then you'll see the content, as I just outlined, developing your informative story, determining the client's 3 criteria, and customizing your informative story. Now, the principles of persuasion come to us from no other than, some of you may know, Aristotle 2,500 years ago. And those principles of persuasion have been used over and over again, and you can recognize them today, whether it's government, education, or business, or of course through Toastmasters. The 3 principles of persuasion: logos, the appeal to a person's logic; pathos, the appeal to the emotion; and ethos, the appeal to value. And some of you may have heard of it described this way: appeal to the head, the heart, and the character of the individual. Now, you'll notice I've represented these 3 ways of appealing to an audience, or in this case, it's going to be the employer. I've represented it in this pie shape, and I've given logos quite a bit of predominance, and you might wonder why, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But let's just take another moment and go a little bit more into depth on these 3 areas of appeal. So appeal to the head is any information that you're giving the employer that makes sense, common sense to him, that appeals to his logic, his critical thinking, his analytical skills. Appeal to the heart is making the emotional connection. The emotional connection sounds a little bit like we're in therapy, which isn't appropriate, but think of it in terms of building the rapport with the employer, connecting with him in terms of some mutual understanding, or making a human connection. And the 3rd appeal is ethos, the appeal based on values. The means by which you convince the employer of your believability, your trustworthiness, your sincerity, your good character, your reputation or credibility. So those are those 3 appeals that we're going to incorporate into your informative story. Ah, yes, I said I would get back to the reason that I gave head or logos a pretty significant portion of this pie. Persuasive communication really depends on the right balance of head, heart, and appeal to trust or character, your integrity. And I'll just give you two quick examples. In a speech to inform to a hard-nosed executive, you want probably quite a bit of logos. In your wedding toast to your good friends, now there's an example where you're definitely going to draw the emotion and happiness of the occasion and the good feeling and love in the room. Now, what about ethos? What about the trust and the sincerity? How does that play into your speech to inform? It plays into in this way. If you have a good reputation for, let's say you're giving your speech to inform, and you already have a reputation for being thorough in your research and delivering the facts and nothing but the facts, that is going to make sure that your speech to inform has greater impact. Now, in the case of the wedding, the fact that you have been a sincere, supportive friend for that happy couple all these years, that is going to make your toast more meaningful to them. Now, what is the proportion? What is the right proportion in the speech, the informative story that we're talking about today? In my experience, 20 plus years, you've got to have the logos. The logos is your entry through the door. And let's move on and find out what is the logos, what is the story, and how do you incorporate the supporting evidence that you want to convey in an interview. It's about time that I gave you my definition of an informative story. The logos is your professional strengths. The ethos is the supporting evidence of those professional strengths. And the pathos, the way you're going to make that human connection, the way that you're going to try to make that employer care about you as opposed to all those other candidates, that's going to be the story part of the informative story. And that last piece is, of course, the customizing your story to fit the employer's 3 criteria. And we'll address that toward the end. This is the major part of the presentation, developing your professional story. These are your professional strengths. This comes out of the logos. And it's pretty straightforward. Your education, your certifications, designations, your skills and experience, your interpersonal and problem-solving skills. Now, I placed those 2, interpersonal and problem-solving skills, right there at the top, because without those, you never make it to stage 2 of the interview process. They are a given. They are a must-have in the employment market today. But I want to take a couple of moments and give you the benefit of a recruiter's insight. And this is one aspect I think that the recruiter is most valuable to the candidate. And that is digging deeper into these supposedly or seemingly obvious skills. Time and time again, in a resume, candidates outline duties and responsibilities. They don't make the resume enough achievement-oriented. You want an achievement narration in your resume. This is what you want to come through in your resume. This is your inventory of professional skills. And you want to turn that inventory that you have now, your duties and responsibilities, you want to explode that into a list of achievements. And we won't spend a lot of time on this, but I'll just give you a couple of tips. How many action words are in your resume? Every duty and responsibility you should look at carefully and turn it into an achievement. I you couldn't say I in the resume, initiated new procedures, expanded the role of technical representative, promoted the use of safety policies, reduced time to market, improved, found, supported, developed. You want those action words in your resume. You don't want that precious space on your resume taken up listing duties and responsibilities when the employer already knows the duties and responsibilities of a quality assurance person or a product manager or a technical representative. But he doesn't know what you have achieved in that role. That's what you want to get through. So these achievements, big and small, will provide the framework for your upcoming story. They are the grist for your story mill, the fuel that you will use to stir the enthusiasm of that employer. Now you'll note that I have listed personal skills under that column on the right-hand side. Personal skills that you use in your work are valuable to that employer. And I've given you just a few examples of personal skills. Courage, the willingness to take on a challenge, the willingness to step into an uncertain or new situation. Perseverance, doggedly handling every challenge that comes along the way without giving up in frustration. Precision, you're thorough and devoted to detail. Self-motivated, you take initiative. You don't wait for a manager to tell you what to do. You're proactive. Creativity, your ability to think out of the box. Thoroughness, the tendency to be circumspect, to think of the big picture as well as the detail. Now we'll just go back to that previous slide, and you'll notice that I included in the right-hand column areas from which situations or events from which you derive the greatest personal satisfaction. These are areas that perhaps have been acknowledged in your career and maybe haven't even been recognized, but they're areas which on a personal level have given you a great deal of satisfaction. Those are keystones in your career, those situations, those feelings. From those keystones, you will have used these skills, your unique combination of personal skills. And that is what you want to recognize to be able to communicate as well in your story, which we will get to in a few minutes. And that will help you become unique in the client's mindset. And I'll explain that in just a moment. So we have our first breakout session. And what I'd like you to do is think of a career achievement, whether it's recognized publicly or whether it's just something that you yourself are very proud of. What were the obstacles or challenges you needed to be able to overcome to make that achievement? And what were the personal skills or attributes that this achievement demonstrated? So we're going to go into a breakout room for 5 minutes, and Adam is going to post that question in the breakout room. And at the end of that 5 minutes, I really appreciate you including in the chat or writing in the chat, some of the personal skills or attributes that came to your mind that you demonstrated other than your interpersonal and problem solving skills, because everybody has to have those. So we'll take 5 minutes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Now, I'm just wondering if any of you thought of some personal skills, some personal attributes that perhaps I hadn't listed that in fact you recognized are a pretty essential part of who you are and an essential part of your professional success. I wonder if any of you thought of anything new there. Well, hopefully you'll start thinking of some great new thoughts to bring into your informative story. Now I have to. Sorry about that. I should have known that I have to share my screen yet again. Okay. Now we have your professional strengths. We've discussed your professional strengths as being the hard skills, the soft skills, and including your personal skills. Your supporting evidence. Now, this is the part of the informative story where you want to be sure that you've convinced the employer that what your resume says and what you are saying is in fact true. But you don't want to be standing or sitting in front of that employer and discussing your own achievements. So the technique, of course, used by storytellers often is that other characters in the story convey some information about the main character. And in the same way, the third-party testimonials are so powerful. When a client says, so imagine yourself speaking in front of an employer, and you say to the employer says, well, what are your organizational skills like? Or tell me about your organizational skills would be more like a question you might ask. And then you can respond by saying, well, my customers tell me there's no one better organized than I am, and they come to me for information all the time. Or you could say you could take a quote from a performance review, a direct quote, a direct phrase, excerpt from references. You can think of remarks and comments that people have made and refer to those, mention those in the course of your interview. In terms of something concrete, there is an advantage, in fact, to Zoom interviews. You could take a moment and outline on a single slide a series of achievements in a certain area of outlining some specific achievements in your resume. You could perhaps even show an example of a report, as long as, of course, it's not a confidential report of the company that you are currently working for. You can demonstrations, illustrations, these are all ways of reinforcing to the client that you have the skills and abilities that are outlined in your resume and that you've discussed with them during the course of the interview. Now we come to your story. What are the essential elements of a story? Because you hear about this all the time. Oh, storytelling is so important to business. Storytelling here, storytelling there. What makes a story? A story needs a character, and of course, in this instance, you're the character. A story has a narrative or a theme, and we've already discussed your story has a narrative or theme of achievement, and a story has a plot. The essential architecture of a storyline is situation, challenge, outcome. When you think of all the movies you've seen, all these TV programs you watch, what engages you is a situation. The character is presented with a challenge or a problem. How he resolves the problem is the outcome. And that's what you want to incorporate in your story. And how do we do that? Here's a diagram. Here's a diagram of the professional, outlining the professional strengths, the supporting evidence, and it feeds into your storyline, the situation, the problem, the outcome. Now, I've given some examples of stories. Now, imagine, here's an example of a story, and pretend that I'm the candidate speaking to the employer. I was hired as a customer service rep. My first day on the job, I discovered that the training that I'd been told about was delayed, maybe it was even canceled. What to do? My first day on the job. So I spent my first day on the job trying to find out who had taken the course most recently. Indeed, I found out who had taken the course recently. I contacted them, got a hold of the manuals, spent my time after hours going through the manuals, and within a couple of weeks, I was up and running. Now, there's the story, the situation, the problem or challenge, and the outcome. And what does that convey to an employer? What would that convey to you if someone told you that? Well, I would think it would convey resourcefulness, independence, self-motivated, and proactive. And here's one more story. While I was a project manager for XYZ, I was responsible for a $1 million project, but there was a major restructuring in the company and priorities changed. My budget was cut, but the deliverables remained the same. So I had to do some renegotiation with suppliers. I reallocated some internal resources and rallied my team to find some improvements in efficiencies. So that story communicates that this individual is a problem solver and has strong people skills. And one more story. As VP of the technology with a company deep in mergers and acquisitions mode, I was getting a lot of pushback from newly acquired companies in terms of transitioning to our corporate standard software. I decided to meet one-on-one with IT managers to try to understand their needs and, in fact, to find the best of both worlds. I could learn from them and they could benefit from the corporate software. So if an employer asked this individual, or let me put it this way, if the individual candidate knew that the employer was looking for a collaborative, flexible style, this is the story in his story set that he would tell that employer. So, how do we zero in on the 3 key criteria of the client? And this is very brief, 3 slides, I believe. Okay, you have a position description. Of course, the position description usually outlines required education and roles and responsibilities. In other words, they are looking for someone who has experience doing X, Y, and Z. The second criteria is inevitably good interpersonal skills and good problem-solving skills. 90% of hires are of candidates who have good interpersonal and good problem-solving skills. It's like buying a house today. Everybody wants an open concept and lots of natural light. Well, most people do. Now, the third criteria is something you really have to figure out for yourself. The unique aspects of the employer's situation or requirements. And I'll get into that in just, well, I'll mention that right now. I'll give you a couple of examples. I had one client and he was not a logos person and he wasn't really a storyteller. He was all about character. He would only hire candidates with high energy, strong motivation, and willing to succeed, and a willingness just to give it their all. And he knew, well, in his experience, when he hired those candidates, they always did well with his company. Here's another unique aspect of a client situation. I had a client once who asked me to help him find a sales representative to handle the CIBC account. And then he told me who in the city of Toronto he wanted for that account. There was no other candidate he wanted to consider because he wanted someone who had a strong trust, a relationship with CIBC, a person whom CIBC trusted implicitly. There was only one person he believed that had that strong a relationship. And of course, that's who we found for the opportunity. So there are just a couple of examples. I'll give you one more. If you realize or find out that the employer has lost his previous 2 employees because they just couldn't handle the travel requirements, of course, if you enjoy travel and are free to travel at that time in your life, that is going to be a strong asset for you in terms of this particular opportunity. So here I've represented the client's 3 criteria: experience, soft skills, and unique aspects. And what we want to do now is customize your informative story with this client's criteria. And again, your informative story is your professional strengths, the supporting evidence in a story narrative, custom fit. So we have your selection of informative stories, and what we're going to do is superimpose over that the client's specific requirements, or the client's, what we used to call them, the client's hot buttons. And maybe some people still do call them hot buttons. So from your inventory of personal stories, those examples of the different the achievements and how you got those achievements, that from that selection, you select the stories that are most specific, that are most relevant, that will be of most interest to that particular client. So we just have another breakout session now. And what are some of the ways you can research the unique aspects of an employment opportunity? And we will spend 2 or 3 minutes, or whatever time we have after the breakout session, to actually discuss this very important point. So again, we'll move to a breakout. Welcome back. I said I would just take a few minutes to discuss some of the ways to research the unique aspects of an employment opportunity. Some of you may have other ideas, but some of the ideas that come to mind are, of course, do you know anyone who works at that company that you're applying to? Do you know anyone who specifically knows that employer that you're going to be interviewed by? Do you know anyone in the industry that that company that you're applying to is in? So that if you don't have the industry experience, the knowledge of the marketplace, the prevailing trends, the knowledge of the thought leaders, of that industry, you need to become educated about the culture, the prevailing, as I just mentioned, the prevailing thinking, the knowledge of who's who in the industry. These are all specific aspects that can help you establish common ground with that employer. And some, of course, I would just emphasize over and over again, research, research, research. You cannot do too much research. Do you know from which companies that employer has hired other candidates? I mean, truly, there are companies that they have hire a successful candidate from X, Y, and Z company, and that candidate worked out so well. So another candidate coming from that same company is immediately looked upon in a rather favorable way. He already has a bit of an edge. So those are just a few ways to try to find out as much as you can about the specific, unique aspects of that opportunity. As I mentioned, if an employer has lost his previous 2 employees because of travel, you really like to know that. And that's just a simple example. Okay, now I've outlined a series of 5 questions. And the reason I'm posing these 5 questions is because the answer to these questions provides some information that I think would be really helpful. Because that's the feedback I've received over the years from many, many candidates. So these are the interview tips in starting with a question. How much detail do I give in an interview? And you're thinking about that too, because you've got this story to tell. How much detail do I go into when I'm telling this story? So I have a wonderful tip for you. Think of asking the question, to the employer, would you like me to give you more detail? So you answer the question of the employer first by giving basically the highlights of the answer, the highlights of your story. And then you ask, would you like to give you more detail? And this has 2 wonderful benefits. One is that if the employer doesn't want more detail, you're not going to waste a few minutes of that precious interview giving him more detail than he even wants. And the second benefit is that even though he said he doesn't want more detail, he now knows that you have more detail to give him. So he knows you're that much more informed about that particular topic. The next question, what if I don't have a position description? Well, this takes us back to the Mary story. Mary, believe it or not, did not have a position description. It was an interview, a panel interview, 3 managers. She just, I guess, knew their names, but had no position description. No wonder she was a little panicky and didn't know how to prepare. So what I told her was, Mary, you're being interviewed by an aggressive, successful, fast-growing business. You know that that business hires people, that every position in that business has something to do with growing the business, with contribution to the bottom line. But Mary says to me, but Marenka, I'm not in a sales role. I'm not in a customer service role. But we looked at her experience and the highlights of what she had done, and you could draw a link between what she had done and the growth of that business, the growth of that company that she was working for. So we incorporated that custom narrative, the custom narrative for this business. We incorporated that, well, I should say we weaved through that examples of her interpersonal and her problem-solving skills, we developed 4 stories, and those were the stories she drew from to answer her questions in the interview. And she said it worked like a charm. And I was thrilled because I was nervous myself as to whether or not I could help her without knowing the employer or even having the position description, but it worked like a charm. The third question is, are there other ways to convey ethos? Well, of course there are. And I put this question in so that I could just be sure to remind you that when you're in a Zoom interview, you thoroughly check the background. No clutter, no paraphernalia. Keep it as professional as possible. Be there early for the Zoom interview. Take a little extra time in terms of your grooming. Start out with a positive comment to the employer. Do your research and make sure that you have, we called it the beautiful baby statement. Have something positive, complimentary to say about that employer, about the company itself. And I'm not saying, some off-the-shelf kind of remark. Genuinely research that company, and when you do so, highlight the items that you researched, that you truly like, that you truly admire about that company. And that's your opening statement in your interview. And that's why we called it the beautiful baby, because you compliment their parents on their beautiful baby. And of course, you've got an immediate common ground. And the fourth question, is personal life experience part of professional strengths? If it's relevant, absolutely. And the example I love to use is if you were a camp counselor with 30 young children and you had to manage the worries of overprotective, 30 sets of overprotective, worrying parents following up at the end of each day, you know how to handle stressful and people-related situations. There's just one example, but it has to be relevant, of course, to the business environment. And the last question, how do I talk about a failure in my career? You focus on, and probably you know this, or could guess, you focus on the lesson learned in that experience. And that basically leaves a positive spin on that particular experience. So those are my interview tips. I will invite any further questions or comments. And
Okay, thank you, Marika, for an interview. Okay, we do have one question in our chat, and this is coming from Tech2, and that person is asking, when should you ask for compensation in the interview process?
Oh, great question. I'm so glad you asked that, because it's an aspect of this presentation that we just didn't get into. It's part of the interview process. So 2 comments. One is, well, the most important thing to remember is you look at the interview process in an overall way. You know that there is going to be 3 or 4 interviews most often before there's actually a job, an extension or an offer of employment. And we've always coached our candidates that consider 4 interviews, and maybe you want to make it 3, but to be safe, it's 4. Consider the fact that you are in a sales mode through interview 1, 2, and 3. When you reach so you are in a sales mode. You're in the process of convincing the client, the employer, that you're the number, that you are the candidate that you should have hired. So it's only in the third interview that compensation is discussed. And usually you take the cue from the client, from the employer. When he initiates the conversation about compensation, you know that the balance is shifting. The employer is now in a sales mode, selling you on the opportunity. So that's a very important question. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That makes perfect sense that you're in a sales mode for the first 3 interviews, and at the last interview that's when you will ask for, what the compensation would be or to.
And I'll just add, Angela, I mean, that's one of these unique aspects that you have to try to research. I mean, are there 3 interviews, or maybe are there 4, I should say, or 4 were maybe a bit long, but I've seen 7. I've seen 7 and 8 interviews in some of these opportunities. But if it's 3 interviews, then 1 and 2, you are in the selling mode. Mm-hmm.
So if there is if during even the first interview, they ask you the question, what is your expectation in terms of compensation? You may not know how many interviews that there may be overall, but at that very first interview, when they ask you, or if there is an opportunity to ask that question, would you ask that question in the very first interview?
Yeah. Well, no, you wouldn't. But if the employer asks you, what are you expecting? Right. Then you just have to give a very diplomatic answer and say something along the lines of, well, I expect that the compensation in this opportunity is reflective of the market today. You have to say, in fact, that's a very good point. You want to practice, maybe even write out and practice exactly the words you want to use, but that's more or less that you're expecting that they will be fair. Okay. And
right.
offer you a good opportunity, a good compensation.
Okay, we only have 2 minutes left.
Oh,
however, we do have 2 more questions.
Okay.
So I'll ask the 2 more questions, so if you can, quickly answer it, and then we will go into the survey. So if people can stay behind and fill out the survey after this, and if you have any further questions, I will give you Marenka's email that you can ask her directly.
Absolutely.
So let's just go with these 2. So follow-up question is, what are some of the compensation negotiation tips?
Okay, the tip that you want to, is the most important tip perhaps, is you want to take everything into account. It's not the salary, and maybe the first salary review is like maybe 60% of the compensation. You want to consider of course, the benefits, the benefits, the training opportunities, where that opportunity would take you in terms of your own career. You want to just be very, very circumspect when you consider compensation. Okay. I mean, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we are out of time, but let's just answer one question quickly. Okay. How do you maintain composure in online interviews if technology fails despite testing many times ahead of time?
I am going to hand that over to Andy Mack.
Okay, Adam.
Sorry, Adam. He's the perfect person to answer that question.
I think actually, honestly, with technology, the expectation of failure is surprisingly very understood. Okay. And not everybody has the most exceptional internet. And that speaks for both the interviewer and interviewee. Okay. So I think it's one thing just to not react. Marinka showed a great example where her PowerPoint wasn't working right from the get-go, but she didn't react to it. She took her time and was patient with it. And it's the same thing as silence in the room. Sometimes it's bigger in your mind than it is for the other person. So take the time to adjust, accordingly. But when it comes to Zoom, worst comes to worst, stop the video, start with small and focus on the voice, and then get back to the video. But work your way through it, take your time, and you'll get there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Adam.
Okay, so I think with that, we've run out of time. I
Okay.
will post Marika's email in the chat. So if you have any further questions, you can ask her directly. And also, if you want her slides, also send her an email. With that, we'll let Marika wrap up, and then please fill in the survey in the chat so that we can get some feedback on how we can improve on this workshop. Okay, take it away, Marika.
Okay, I have one, let me just screen share again, I guess. Oh dear, okay. I just have one, oh dear, yeah, Adam told me to, okay. I have one summary slide that the informative story is a proven interview preparation approach. And remember, it'll help build that confidence for the interview, as well as help you prepare for the interview, as well as prepare a persuasive presentation for that interview. It incorporates the 3 most powerful principles of persuasion, appealing to the head, the heart, and the person. And it's a unique, it results in a unique signature story that communicates your very professional best. A signature story that communicates your professional best. That's my big message. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And
Okay, thank you very much, Marika. Great presentation, a lot of good information on how we can create our best story for interviews, promotions, or at any other occasion where we need to sell ourselves. So, and also I would like to thank Adam for his
Yes,
expertise
thank you,
as
Adam.
being our Zoom host and Zoom provider. So I have provided in the chat the survey. So we would really appreciate it if you can fill out the survey before you leave this workshop. The next conference activity is not until 11 a.m. So you still have time. So if you can please fill in the survey. And I also post on the chat Marika's email. Should you have any further questions for her, or if you want a copy of the slides, then you can send her an email.
thank you very much, Angela, for being a wonderful, supportive activator. And thank you, Adam, for guiding me through the this whole Zoom workshop presentation. Thank you both.
Great job, Marinka. Thank
Yeah,
you.
great
Thank you,
job.
everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Top notch, Marinka. That was so professional and I learned so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Whoever's saying that.
It's Eve. Yeah, I know how much time and effort and passion goes into preparing a workshop. That was one of the best Toastmasters workshops I've taken since 2014.
Oh my gosh. Oh, thank you so much.
Yes, that's great.
Wow. Oh, I'm going to jot that down for my informative story. Oh, that's just great. Thank you so much, Eve. That's so wonderful of you.
I'll pop you a quick email with more compliments and what was really effective of the workshop. I
Oh,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I would appreciate that because I would definitely like to, just take it up a notch, especially.
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much. That's great.
Yeah, thank you very much for everybody that attended and your positive feedback. So please do fill out the survey before you leave this Zoom session so that we can get some feedback on where we can improve, and also any other comments that you may have. We would really appreciate it. It'll go a long way.
Oh, okay. Bye then, everyone, and have a great day. I'm going to sign off. Thank you.